I just want to introduce Krish, and we can get started. My name is Richard Garcia, by the way.
Well, I'm Krish Mohip. So just an introduction, and then
Sure.
we'll jump into some questions. Well, first of all, thanks for coming out and listening to what I have to say, I guess. And I'm just really excited to be here. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and what brings me into this role of education and what even brings me into this seat.
Can you move the mic up?
Yeah, and even into this country. So my parents are immigrants from Trinidad and Tobago. And I tell this story because it really gives you a better understanding of who I am and what I'm about. My dad grew up in the most, the richest of poverty you can imagine. Didn't have his first shoes until he was 12. None of my grandparents, either on my mom or my dad's side, made it through past third grade education. And, they lived a tough life. My dad, I tell the story about my dad first because growing up in poverty, I realized from my father that you can escape anything with a good education, and you can better yourself with a good education. My dad was he was 18, he was graduating high school, went to the best high school in Trinidad, and because he didn't know what to do, he didn't have parents to tell him what to do, he just did what everyone else did. He went to work in the oil fields. And so there was a day, he was about 23, he was feeling sick, he didn't go to work, and there was a massive explosion, and everyone he worked with died that day. And so he felt pretty lucky. I told you my dad was smart, right? So 2 weeks later, he figured out how to get to America and put himself through college. So he ended up getting a doctorate, working as a college professor in Chicago. And really, I say that story again because I learned from my dad that the only one guarantee in life is a good quality education. So in between that bachelor's and that doctorate, my dad went back to Trinidad and he married my mom. My mom was teaching kindergarten at the time. She's just, my mom's an amazing woman. And so she came back to, Chicago with my dad. They met 3 times. They went on he said it wasn't arranged, but it sounds like it. So they met each other. The second time was actually a phone call where my dad asked him to marry her, and the third time was the wedding. So within a month, my mom went from not knowing my father to living in a 1-bedroom apartment with another couple on the north side of Chicago. And so my mom got here and went to go back into teaching. And that's when she found out that none of her coursework would transfer. And that for her to be a teacher again, she would have to go through all of her coursework and get certified all over again, get a bachelor's degree. She got 2 more masters after that. My dad wasn't all that interested in that. He wanted a family. He wanted to get moving. This was the 1960s. So it took my mom 10 years, but she never gave up. And so from my mom, I learned the importance of perseverance. She had a dream. She knew what she wanted to do, and she never gave up. She taught in Chicago for 25 years, mainly as a kindergarten teacher. And I learned from my parents, again, my dad, about the value of an education, and my mom, persistence. Because I know so many of my friends. I grew up in the North Shore of Chicago, really rich, affluent district. And I saw so many kids with great opportunities that never amounted to anything because they did not have those they didn't have those skills. They didn't have perseverance. They didn't value education. And so because of that, I saw a lot of my friends end up failing. Some in jail, some in drugs, and some aren't with us anymore. But I was kind of going along. I'm the baby in the family, and very much the baby in the family. And I was just kind of getting along and just doing fairly well. And it was my summer, right before I went to high school, my sister got sick. My sister was my best friend. She was 18 years old. She got sick, and in the course of 3 weeks passed away. 2 weeks before I started high school. I went into complete depression at that point. So here's an AB student going into high school. I don't know anybody there. High school is about 2,000 kids. I knew maybe 50 people there. And my grades just tanked. I was getting all C's, a few D's sprinkled in there. If it wasn't for sports, I'd be failing everything my coaches got me through. And I was getting out of it. I was coming out of that depression. And I was getting ready for my junior year. And I went to go talk to my counselor. And I said to my counselor, I said, Ms. K, I said, I can do so much better than what I'm doing right now. And I just want an opportunity to show you. And she looked at me and she said, Krish, I do believe. She says, I believe you're working to your capacity. I do believe that you are a remedial or basic child. And with any luck, you can get into a 2-year degree or maybe work a skilled trade. And so it was the first time in my life I had come forward to say, I was coming out of that depression. I was ready to try. I wanted to do something. And the one person that was supposed to help me just gave up on me. So I was walking out, I had tears in my eyes, and I glanced over and I saw Mr. Anderson, who was my sister's guidance counselor, and he happened to be the head of the counseling department. And he asked me what happened, and I told him. And he says, well, I wish I knew you were coming to have that conversation, because I've been waiting for you to have that conversation. He's like, Krish, I've been sending every week a counselor to you to talk, and you refuse to talk to her. I had no idea why this woman kept coming to me, just bugging me, like, leave me alone. And so he said to me, he's like, I'll give you 6 months. I'll give you 1 semester to prove to me what I already know, that you can do it. And so from then on, my junior year through senior year, I was a straight A student. I was in honors and AP classes. I ended up getting a presidential scholarship to a school in Iowa. And you know, I say that story because I realized that I was on the path to not graduating. I had a dad with a PhD that worked at a college. I had a mom with 2 masters. I had a good, solid family structure. We talked about education all the time, and I was this close to not graduating. So even though when you may have great family structures, you still need to have connections with people in school. Someone still needs to believe in you. And for me, it was Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, I wish I could tell Mr. Anderson the story, because he will never know the impact that he's had on my life. I did, however, get to see Miss K one time, and I was a principal at a school. And I was working on my PhD, and I had to tell her that, and it was a great, satisfying moment. So essentially, that's what brings me here into education. What brings me to Boulder, because I'm guessing you guys have probably seen my resume, and you've seen the work that I've done, right? I've worked in Chicago Public. I've chosen to go into some of the most struggling areas. I did the transformation unit, one of the largest transformation units in the country. And then I got tapped by the governor of Ohio to come lead the first state takeover in one of actually the poorest city in the country. Clearly, I'm not working with a population like Boulder. The reason I'm here, I have 3 reasons that I'm really attracted to this population, and this shifted for me about 7 years ago. They're called Noah, Bella, and Riley. Noah and Bella are my 7-year-old twins, and Riley is my 5-year-old monster. She's a tear. She is B. 30 years ago. But anyways, I struggled so much with their school district. And my children are brilliant. They're gifted, right? I'm that dad. Every parent thinks their kid's gifted, but I'm telling you, these kids are gifted. So my daughter, both of them, are reading Harry Potter for the 2nd time, the entire series. They're reading at a 7th grade level. They're in 2nd grade. And I go to talk to the teacher, and I want to have this conversation, but the conversation's never happening. It's the same conversation I wanted to have in kindergarten, the same conversation I wanted to have in 1st grade. The conversation I wanted to have was, my child is at a 3rd grade level going into kindergarten. And all I'm hearing is, oh, she's a great child, she's associating well. In 1st grade, she's at a 5th grade level, she's doing a great job, she's a pleasure to have in class. But I never had the conversation that said, your child is reading at a 5th grade level. We are going to have your child with us for a year, and this is how we are going to get her to a 6th grade level. This is how we're going to differentiate instruction. And my struggle was, they were doing everything for the lowest performing group, but nothing for the highest performing. And I didn't mean you had to sink in millions of dollars into this classroom, but the simple thing like differentiation, which is a skill that all teachers know and should have, and just making sure you put that expectation, making sure that you have some data in place to say, this is where the child is at the beginning of the year, let's check to see if they're making progress in the middle, and let's see where they end up at the end. And let's have some conversation, let's progress monitor along the way. We don't just do that for low-income children, we don't do that just for low-performing children, we should do that for all children. And so, I just have this, I mean, I've done it. And I guess that's kind of why I'm trying to take a step out of the area that I'm in, because I've kind of proven myself as a principal, as a deputy chief, and now as a chief executive officer. I'm showing how to build sustainable futures for students in low-performing areas, and I want to come in and take those same practices, overlaid on top in a fluent district, and really go from great to excellent, or excellent to phenomenal. And you know, my whole take on this thing is, I'm a dreamer. My wife tells me all the time that I'm a dreamer, but if you have a district like Boulder, then what's stopping it from being not only the best district in, in Colorado, but the best district in the country? And when I say to you, we're the best district in the country, then I say, why are we setting our sights so low? Because America's ranked the 14th best country in education. So I just want to expand our horizons. I really, truly believe that it doesn't necessarily need to cost an exorbitant amount of money to give a child a high-quality education, and just build a system where you hold all the adults, and I'm not just talking about the adults in the school system, but the adults in a community, hold them accountable for high-quality instruction every single day for every single child. And that's really what brings me here. That's why I'm so passionate and so excited to be here, because I have had those questions from my friends and my family, like, you're gonna be bored. And I'm like, there's nothing boring about a district like this. And to be honest with you, I was scared about, 10 years ago, I would have been scared to come into a district like this. I think you have to be amongst the best. I think you have to have solid skills, and I think you have to know instruction inside and out if you really are going to move the needle in a district like Boulder.
You want me to start? Thank you. Are we going to introduce ourselves first, or as we say our questions? Okay. So I'm Jenny Belval. I'm from Broomfield, and I was on the school board until December, 8 years. So my question is, how do you see parents and families working together with the superintendent's office? It says within the superintendent's office, but I think, wait, I'm not understanding this question. Parents and families is capitalized, so I'm sorry. So it must be our parents and families department? And how do you see that working within the superintendent's office? I'm going to assume that's what that question is.
I'm confused. I don't understand the question. Next.
Okay, so I don't understand it either. So, but what I think it means is it says, how do you see parents and families are capitalized, working together within the superintendent's office? So that's the question.
So I think it's important to work with parents and families. And that's a pretty obvious answer. I think it's more a question of how do you do that. So what are the systems and structures that are there so that you have open communication with the superintendent? How do I, and this is a question I always ask myself, is how am I staying engaged and in tune with every single school? I don't want to be surprised when I go to a board meeting and I'm hearing that there's a problem in a school. I want to be able to know what is happening. So whether that's clear and just good systems where information flows, so I know what's happening, but also then opportunities for me to be in the schools. I'm not the type of superintendent that likes to be in my office. It's probably the last place I'd like to be. I like to be in schools. Something that I've been doing ever since my days in Chicago is I've been doing coffee with, so whatever my job was. So right now it's coffee with the CEO. So I would go every day is basically how I would start my days, and I would go and talk to parents, and they knew when I was coming, and we would publicize that so I can get that information. Last year, I did 95 community meetings where parents and students and families in the community could engage with me because I wanted to get input as we're going through the progress of transforming a district. This year we doubled that, so we're on pace to have about 180 meetings. So I mean, I'm constantly in the community because at the end of the day, the school district has to be accountable and has to be flexible and has to be able to respond to parents. In a district like Boulder with 56 schools, you have to have then the autonomy for schools and the flexibility to provide the supports that are needed for each school. I can't imagine I would have a system for every single school without tweaking it in some way. And I think those tweaks come from the community input, whether it's families, nonprofits, the clergy, whoever it is that's involved in being part of that stakeholder group. So again, it's really about listening. It's about building structures so that you can get the information. It's about building structures and building opportunities for parents to be involved, and then being transparent through the entire process. And the one thing that has to happen is you have to develop trust. And the only way I know to develop trust is to just have follow through. When I say I'm going to do something, then do it, and do that 100% of the time.
Hi, my name is Wendy Fiedler, and I'm a community member from Broomfield. I had 2 sons graduate from Broomfield High School a long time ago. That's why I have gray hair. So my question is, what about the BVSD superintendent position prompted you to apply to this position, or even consider interviewing with our district? And I think you've already addressed that in your introduction. So I'd like you to emphasize this.
Okay.
Part of the question. What value contributions do you think that you can bring to our district within your first year of service?
So I'm not sure, to be honest with you, because I'm not 100% sure where you guys are and where the need is. So part of it is continue to review where you have been, what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses. Get a good understanding. The last time we did a comprehensive assessment of central office and then individual school diagnostic reviews of every building. Where I bring a lot of value is in my communications, in my ability to work with a diverse group of community members. And I also am extremely instructional when it comes to, when you're looking at superintendents and people at the higher levels, you don't typically have somebody that can get into a classroom and work with teachers and take over classes and teach and just have that level, that layer, and that amount of expertise when it comes to instruction. So I think that's something that sets me apart from most people that you would talk to in a superintendent's role.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Melanie Goss, and I'm a parent with a second grader and a fourth grader. And the question that I have is, describe how you would work with a community that is highly engaged, some would say opinionated, about public education.
Probably at a bar. Just joking. I think the one thing you have to do is just, I mean, I've worked with opinionated groups. If anyone's ever done some background on where I am right now, there's a lot of opinions in Youngstown, Ohio. So it's really about listening to people, making them feel valued, making sure, even if you don't agree with them, just hearing what it is that they're saying and trying to get into their shoes to understand where they're coming from. I don't know anyone in this world that tries to make bad decisions or tries to think evil thoughts. I think they're just going through life in a way that they know best. And so I always try to empathize to see where it is that they're coming from, but then always shift the conversation back towards what is best for children. And that's really what we have to say. And I hate that because I know everybody says it's all about the kids, right? But truly, it has to be about children. And you know, one thing I failed to say in my opening was my philosophy around education. And it's very simply, all children can learn, all children want to learn, and it's up to the adults to make it happen. And I say that realizing that most people don't really believe that. So I hear people say all the time that all children can learn, but when you lower expectations for some demographics, you really don't believe all children can learn. And then when you say to a child, you kick him out of class, or you're saying, you know, he's not engaged, he's sleeping, he's lazy, and saying he doesn't want to learn. Well, no, he doesn't. He does want to learn. Humans, I think it was Aristotle said, humankind is curious by nature, and I believe that we are constantly looking for information. And so it's not that kids don't want to learn, it's sometimes they don't want to learn the way we're teaching them. So how do we engage them to become really, you know, productive in their own learning process? And then the last thing is that all adults, you know, it's up to the adults to make it happen. So I always say I've never met a child that's failed. I've met children who adults have failed them. And so it's really about engaging with the community to understand what is the goal of Boulder Valley. How does every adult in this community play a role in helping these children become more successful? So if our average ACT score is 23.3, then why isn't it 26? If 92% of the kids are graduating in 4 years, why is it not 99? So asking these questions, looking to the community to see what they can do. So you may be opinionated, but is your opinion helping these children grow in the areas we've defined as a district that we know that they need to grow and prosper in?
My name is Jeff Clay. I live in Lafayette. My two boys graduated from Centaurus High School in Lafayette. I work for the YMCA here in town, and I also serve on the Bond Oversight Committee for the district. This is a long question, so bear with me, and it's not mine. But if you need me to repeat it, just let me know. Chromebooks are used in BVSD elementary schools, grades K through 5. The current student internet use policy states web and email filtering software that blocks or filters material and information that is obscene, child pornography, or otherwise harmful to minors, as defined by the board, shall be installed in the district's data center. The very next sentence states that students shall report access to material and information that is obscene, child pornography, harmful to minors, or otherwise in violation of this policy to the supervising staff member. What is your experience ensuring internet safety in the classroom?
So it really comes down to it. Sometimes technology could be your best friend, sometimes it could be an enemy. But in the case of protecting children from the dangers that are out there on the internet, it's sometimes going back to what's out there and what technology exists to stop and to protect kids. So there are some good software programs that can go out there and block the internet and block sites. What I've realized, though, is that kids are pretty resourceful, and they will find ways. They'll find proxy servers, or I don't even know if that's a word that I'm using correctly, but they'll figure out a way to get on it. I remember we rolled out Chromebooks. I put them in the high schools, and we blocked everything. I thought we were airtight, and then I'm in there. I remember we had blocked Facebook and YouTube, and I see some kid watching a movie off of YouTube, and I looked at him. I said, "Well, how did you do that?" So it's really about staying on the cutting edge to figure out, what exists, what is that? I don't believe children are going to self-report themselves. Maybe kindergartners. But I think that 8th grader that finally got into that website isn't going to go out and tell it, but he'll tell his friends. But he's not going to go out there and tell the teacher, hey, look what I found. And that's where you have to then go into technology. One area that really worried me was, we went to mainly Google, doing Google Classroom. And the kids, we didn't have a good way to monitor the use of their email. We didn't know, and I was just worried about email. I didn't even think about anything else. And so I started working with this organization, this company called Gaggle, who kind of sits on top of that and monitors everything. And what sold me was, he told me a story. He's like, Krish, it's not just about their Gmail accounts. It's about all of the Google applications that they're using out there. And I was like, it intrigued me. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, we had a case at a school district, he didn't say which one, where a girl was talking to a boy, or actually a man, it was kind of a sexual predator, on Google Docs. So the kids would open up a Google Doc and then share it, and it was just like instant messaging, and we would never have known that. And you want to give the kids autonomy to use the devices, but you understand that maybe 10% of them are going to try and misuse the devices. So having some of those softwares and some of those technologies that exist out there to work for us. We've stopped, with Gaggle now, we've stopped child pornography, we've stopped a plethora of fights, and there's been a couple suicide attempts that we were able to, we get the alerts, especially those types of alerts. There was a girl that was emailing a friend. Thankfully, I didn't realize, they still don't know. I went public and I said, we're going to monitor your email, but they still use them. And she was emailing her friend saying she was going to kill herself, and we had police at the house by 2 a.m. And stopped that. And so, I worry about those types of things because, I have children too. I have, like I said, my 7-year-olds and 5-year-olds are constantly on their devices. And I'm always worried about who's out there and who's trying to talk to them. And, it's a scary world. And that's why we just need to make sure we put protections in place.
You have approximately 15 minutes to answer the next 8 questions.
15 minutes? Have you not heard how I answer questions? Thank you. You were supposed to give me a 25-minute, though. I'm just messing with you.
When I saw it, you would only have 1 more minute. I consulted.
Hi, I'm Celeste Landry, and I have 2 kids who graduated from BVSD schools. And I work at a Title I school in Central Boulder, but this question is from somebody who is on the PTA for a Title I school on the east side of the district. The disparity in income levels between the east side and the west side of the county is evident in the amount of money each school's PTA has been able to raise for the enrichment of our schools. This inequity is also evident in the test scores among the most wealthy versus the poorest schools in BVSD. Are you aware of this income gap within the district, and how would you work to fix the inequity in funding?
So I have looked at that, and so I want to say this, and it's my belief, and kind of goes back to the work that I've been doing, but it's that zip codes don't determine educational outcomes for children. We as a school system determine those. So what I mean by that is just because somebody grows up in an impoverished area, or somebody grows up in a situation where they don't have the economic advantages of others, doesn't mean that they're going to score lower on academic achievements. I say all the time, there's not an academic, or there's not an achievement gap, there's an opportunities gap. And we have to make sure that we provide the opportunities for children. I don't know necessarily, haven't seen the PTO budgets, so I don't know what type of inequity we're seeing there. But I've also realized from, working with large budgets and running Title I schools and school improvement grants, that it's money alone does not solve the problem. So just putting more money into a school isn't going to fix the issues of poor instruction. You have to dive deep in there and see what is the issues that are affecting the children. So yes, children that come from areas of poverty, they do have some other issues that we need to work on. But I think all children have issues, and all children have challenges, and we need to make sure that we find ways to address them. First thing is, have we identified what the issues are? Do we have the right wraparound and services for children in there? Have we engaged with the community and used all the services out there that are free to help support? Are we writing the grants to get the types of opportunities for our Title I schools that don't necessarily exist? And then essentially, how are we using our Title I dollars across the district to help improve parent engagement, to help improve parent outcomes that also will lead to student outcomes? So without really diving deeply into that, I would say, I mean, that would be my answer. But I would also warn that it's not necessarily, money's not going to save or transform a school. I'm coming from a district where we just spent, $1.5 billion over the past 10 years educating 5,000 kids, and with some of the lowest results in the country. So, money is not going to just fix it. You have to put in a system of high quality instruction. You have to build a solid academic program, and you have to just measure for that as you go along the way.
My name is Anna Seeger. I'm mother of two kids here in elementary school, and this question sometimes, but it speaks to me because my husband grew up in El Salvador in a situation similar to what you described your grandparent. With a district that has a high achieving student population that is chronically masked the needs of special populations, for example, ELL, students with IEPs, students eligible for FRL, how would you create a student-centered culture that addresses some of these inequities? Please use concrete examples of how you would approach this work.
So I think the first thing you have to do is understand what are the inequities. So, essentially, what subgroups are we looking at? Do we have a focus on our ELLs? Are we setting goals to say, this is the achievement gap between our ELLs and our high-performing population, and are we measuring to see what we're doing to get there? If there's no urgency in a certain area, then nothing is going to change. If we allow it, then there's not going to be the impact that you want to see. When you're looking at special education students, there's a lot that goes into it. So it's not about just providing the right. It's not about providing a free and appropriate education. It's about providing free and appropriate public education that works. And so making sure as we're going through and we're setting IEP goals, that meet the need of the child, but are also helping that child progress through the curriculum. And the goal of an IEP should be to remove that child from special education services if possible. But then you have to really dive deep into the issues. So, I've been in districts where we ignore some of the issues, where we're not looking at, do you have a comprehensive system or wraparound services to make sure kids, and especially like in Title I schools, are they getting their eyes checked? Are they getting are they getting hearing checked? Are we looking for like dyslexia? And those are some areas that are just really, we sometimes miss the boat on, because if we don't, so I'll take dyslexia for example. So 5 to 15% of the country has dyslexia, and when you look at a child, that's struggling in reading, and you never then even identified the fact that they're dyslexic, we can put all of these different programs in place and all of these different strategies, but it's not going to work because we haven't got to the root cause. So making sure you have some root cause analysis to have a solid understanding of what is happening for that child. And I only say dyslexia because I struggled with that in Chicago. I struggled with it in Ohio, because I know that is an area where we're missing the boat, because we don't even monitor for it.
If you don't mind, the next question's mine, so you can know where it's coming from. Because of your experience in Illinois, you know the extreme problems that can be caused by pension fund deficits. Mm-hmm. So this question is, note number 9 to the BVSD financial statements is 8 pages long, and it states that BVSD's unfunded pension liability is $1.41 billion. How would you address this liability?
Well, did you say BVSDs or BVSDs, the entire state of Colorado?
The state's total is $32 billion.
Okay.
BVSD's share of that is 4.x%, which works out to $1.41 billion.
Okay. So keep in mind when I say this, I used to be an educator. I'm still an educator. I used to be a teacher. So it may not be a popular answer, but we made a promise to educators that a pension would be there. And I think we should fulfill that promise. And we'll have to find ways to do that. And I don't know, like in Illinois, we never got it right as far as it comes down to pension reform. But I think that is something that would have to happen with it at the state level. But as far as I sitting in the role of a superintendent would never want to then not fulfill the promises that we gave to workers as they entered the field, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I don't have a good answer to that without diving deep into it, but I just want you to know my philosophy on it is I would never want to then just cut pensions away from people, because that, I think people sometimes think that this pension that teachers are going to get is some luxurious lifestyle, and it's essentially just enough to get by. And I think our teachers, with the work that they've done, deserve that, and we should continue to fulfill our promises to them.
Thank you.
I'm Kelly Lopez. I'm a mother of a third grader in a school district. So this is the question I have for you. What do you understand to be the largest opportunity for growth across BVSD in the near, medium, and long term? And how do you see yourself as providing the right leadership around this? Growth meaning an area of improvement. Please be specific in your answer and do not keep that generalized.
So 3 minutes left, and you hit me with that. Gotcha. I gotcha. So I got 10 minutes left. Oh, well, so much more time. So I go back to this one statement that I said earlier, and when I was kind of going through your data, I couldn't find the answer because I'm not seeing good assessments of student growth. So what I'm saying, when you look at a district like Boulder, right? So okay, so you got 92% of your students are graduating in 4 years. You have 0.6% of your students dropping out. You are an amazing school district. Not yet the best in the state, but very close. And what I think, you got great opportunities here. So let me talk about two things and I'll go back to that growth. But first, I would want to explore the partnerships you have with Colorado University. And so as I'm looking, I was trying to find out how many of your students are graduating with an associate's degree from the university, since it is right here. And I'm not getting good data, and I'm not able to find that. And I've been asking, but I'm not hearing a number. So that's one thing I would start looking at. If we have students that are so high performing, we should be able to accelerate that growth, get them into a track as early as 6th grade to really start preparing them for an associate's degree by the end of 12th grade. I do that in one of the high schools that I have. We last year graduated 76% of our seniors with an associate's degree from Youngstown State University, and we're on path this year for 83% of those students to graduate with an associate's degree. Many of those students that are graduating with an associate's degree are graduating with an associate's degree plus some extra credits. I also know that Boulder is looking at a reduction in enrollment. And so when I think of what would bring a parent back into the district, I think the thought of having a 2-year degree after 12 years of education here in Boulder might be attractive to parents to want to stay in this district and come back to this district. Because quite honestly, it's a great cost savings when you think of what 2 years of education would cost. We would have to make that a priority in the budget, and we'd have to find how to do it. The other thing I want to just talk about is that your average ACT score is 23.3. If we are honest with ourselves, how many of our students are at grade level because of the teaching, and how many are at grade level because of the families? And I think it's a mixture. I think you guys have great teachers. I think, from what I understand, you get the pick of the cream of the crop here. When there's an opening, you get applicants. You get a ton of applicants coming in. Maybe 100 to 200 is what I've been told. So you have some of the best teachers in the state, and you have some of the best families. But how are we measuring growth? And how are we ensuring that we're building growth targets for every child and making sure those children meet those growth targets and progress monitor along the way, so that a child that is at an 8th grade level, it gets to that 9th or have a stretch goal to get to 9.5 in 1 year. So I want to continue to push on that, because once you start doing things like that, that's when you see your ACT scores going up. That's when you see college scholarships, the amount of scholarship students receiving increasing. And then graduation rates, you see dropout falling, and I mean, some of those metrics really will start moving.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Susan O'Shine. I work in our IT department managing our project management office. I've been here with BVSD for 7.5 years, and I have a son that graduated from the district as well. So my question to you is, what will you hope to accomplish in your first 90 days on the job?
So the first 90 days, it's just getting to know the district. So I would walk in with a superintendent entry plan. I would have goals for what I would be doing prior to coming into the district, goals for my first day, my first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You know, some of the high-level things that I would want to do is I'd want to assess the instruction and assess the operations of central office and of every single school. I would want to be able to meet the key stakeholders that make up Boulder Valley. I would want to get to as many schools. I don't know if I'd get to all 56 in 90 days, but I'd sure try. To meet families, to meet parents, to meet students, to do walkthroughs, and really just do a lot of listening. I really want, I'm not coming in here with any preconceived notions of what Boulder Valley needs. I read the literature, I see the strategic plan, I see the budget. I would probably want to push on that strategic plan a little bit and really operationalize that. So I think at that point I would want to listen and then kind of come up with, are we still holding true to these goals that we have in our strategic plan? Do we want to expand on those? Do we want to start creating our own? But then also looking at what are going to be the yearly outcomes and the yearly metrics we want to measure each school by. But essentially, it's really about just coming in to just understand. You can't really do anything unless you understand the context of where you are. So it's really about understanding Boulder Valley, what makes Boulder Valley School District Boulder Valley, but then also on trying to understand what makes each school unique. In that time, though, you'll also be assessing senior leadership, middle management, building leadership, because if the leadership, you want to make sure you have the right leadership in the right places so that accelerated growth can continue.
Hi, I'm Lisa Medler. I have 2 children, both in high school. I was very young. And I'm also a representative on the District Accountability Committee. So the question that I was assigned was, the safety and security of our students and staff must be a top priority within BVSD. Please discuss your philosophy regarding school safety and security and identify specific strategies and policies you have employed in your current school district.
Yeah, so I think the best deterrent for school violence in schools is good relationships with students. So I say that because I have worked in some of the most violent parts of the cities, whether it's in Chicago or Ohio. And you cannot make a school look like a prison. I don't want school resource officers, they're not trained to work with children and the way that educators are. And there's some great school resource officers out there, but I don't need 6 in every building. I would want to make sure that we have a good safety plan in place, that everybody knows that safety plan. What do you do with a lockdown? What do you do with a soft lockdown? What do you do with a bomb threat? What do you do with a fire alarm? Like, making sure you have solid plans in place that ensure as chaos is happening, we know where all our children are. But it's really about avoiding that chaos. So making sure the schools are secure, having cameras on the door systems, having a conversation. I don't know if you have cameras in your hallways, but that's something to maybe look at to see if it's something that's needed. But I don't know at that point if that's what's needed in schools. So I've had buildings with cameras, I've had buildings without. What really comes down to is making sure everyone's coming in through doors that are monitored and having really great relationships with your kids. In my career, I've pulled 2 handguns off of children that have been loaded. Each time those guns have come into the building, within 45 minutes, somebody has told us that they saw this gun. It's because we had relationships with our children, that they trusted us to know that, 1, that that's wrong, 2, this is what you do when you know something is wrong and this is how you respond, and 3, making sure they had a relationship with someone, an adult that they can go back and they can trust to say those types of things, to report these types of things. So at the end of the day, for me, you put solid plans in place, but nothing takes away or nothing can replace having good quality relationships with children in our buildings.
Hi, I'm Heather Schwartz. I'm in human resources in the tech community, and I have a high schooler and a middle schooler. What works or doesn't work to close the achievement gaps?
Well, like I said, it doesn't work. You just don't throw money at the problem. What works is you have to have, and I could talk for 3 hours. I just talked 3 hours about this yesterday. I should have brought my slides. What works on closing the achievement gap is high quality instruction in every single classroom, every single day. And that's easy to say, hard to build. And so it comes with, and you guys are far ahead of a lot of districts. You have to have an instructional framework that is developed and adhered to in every building. Whether you have an instructional framework for the entire district or you have an instructional framework for a school, you have to choose one. So this is how we teach in Boulder, or this is how we teach in this school. And then you operationalize that. And you say, you break down instruction. You need to break it down and operationalize it so you could plan professional development for teachers. And then as you're rolling out that professional development, you build learning cycles to ensure that teachers aren't being overwhelmed, that as you go week by week, you're building on the progress of the week prior as you're working towards that cycle goal. And at the end of the day, you're holding everybody accountable to teaching towards a best practice that you have designed, that you have identified, and that has walkthroughs. That I have in every role that I've been in. The expectation is that a teacher gets feedback once a week in their instruction, and that person giving the feedback has to be highly qualified and highly skilled in instruction. So that means your building leadership teams have to now become instructional leaders if they're not already. So making sure that they have the skills, much like an instructional coach would, to work with teachers and give feedback. And then once you have all that built, it's the monotony of doing it every single day, and building off yesterday's experiences. The one thing, I was sitting in cabinet, and it was, I don't know who the superintendent was at the time. Chicago gets a superintendent every 18 months. But I was sitting in cabinet, and we were going through the metrics, and food service could tell you how many lunches were served, and the transportation could tell you how many miles we rode that day, and everybody had their metric. And when it came down to the instruction side, we had a hard time answering that question. How effective was our instruction today? And so I was able to answer that question because as a principal, I realized that I was always reading a lot of books on Fortune 500 companies, and I believe it might have been Starbucks, or I can't remember which business. But essentially, companies know their product and know if their purpose is making money, they'll tell you how much money they made in a day. If our purpose in education is providing high quality instruction and seeing how many kids learned, we had to be able to provide that as well. So we would use formative assessments every single day, like just one question, like an exit slip, nothing crazy. But we would be able then to take that information and roll it up to a report to say, on this day, Wednesday, working with this standard, we met success with 83% of our children. And I wanted to have that information because we were so succinct that we knew which standard we were teaching every single day. We knew to what level we were teaching it. We knew what the assessment was going to be at the end of the day, that exit slip. And so I had the information I needed to then go back and make the decisions. So when I saw that with this standard, only 75% of the kids met mastery, but this standard, 90% of kids did. Well, then I know as I'm building out my professional development system for the future, I knew which standards we needed to unpack, which standards we needed to help teachers understand how to teach as a skill, and really look at it at a high level, and then dive deep into each school. And then, from that I would have an understanding district-wide, I would have an understanding by school, and I would have an understanding at a granular level by teacher and by student. So essentially that's how I would go about making sure that we're making progress to all schools and all children.
I think that's it.